Hello and welcome once again to the Land Rover Toolbox videos. This is Mech Tech for you. In these tutorials we're going to show you about the clutch, the driven plate, the pressure plate, release bearing and the release arm and the heavy duty versions that you can get. We'd like to impart to you some of the knowledge we've learned through the years of fitting clutches on various vehicles. Today we'll be working on the 300 TDI Land Rover engine. This is safely suspended from a capable engine crane that can take the weight of this engine, and the balance beam we're using has a 680 kilogram safe working load. Just so you know what I'm talking about, we're going to use some terminology here. I'll show you it. This is a friction plate or a driven plate. This is what we're going to call it. This is a splined hub in the middle, and this is torsion damper spring or springs. This is a pressure plate assembly and it has diaphragm fingers, which you can see. Luckily this is a non-adjustable assembly in your Land Rover. Underneath the pressure plate assembly you have your friction plate. Now it also has torsion springs that can vary in the amount that they have, and this depends on how heavy duty this will be. So basically the clutch itself, the cover plate, is bolted on by 6 bolts onto the flywheel, and you have your gearbox goes in here like so, and the engine drives it. Okay, so the first thing to do is to remove the bolts, and I always leave the top one till last, and then I can lift off the cover plate, and you see that the driven plate is held on and it hasn't dropped out because I have the tool stuck in place here, so I can take it out at my leisure. Believe me, some clutches can be a lot bigger than this and you don't want them dropping on the floor. The alternative way to do this is to hold both pieces of the assembly while you undo the last bolt. Then there you have it, nothing damaged. Okay, so we have the flywheel face here, and we have a toe bearing or a spigot bearing here, and this is a bronze bush in this case on the Land Rovers. They should be in good condition and not loose like this example. This has just dropped out. We'll show you how to fit these into the crankshaft later on. The flywheel face can be found in all sorts of conditions, and this one here has had the clutch stuck to it because it hasn't done anything for a long time, so it's actually seized on there. It took a hammer to take this off. Right, so all clutch plates were not made equal, and we're going to concern ourselves with the size of the actual plate or the driven plate itself. As you can see here, this is a 1/4 of an inch larger. Perhaps it wouldn't make much difference to you, but if you had ridges and scoring on your flywheel, then you would have a problem. It would wear out your disc quicker and you would have a bad clutch operation. So when we fit a new driven plate or a clutch kit onto the flywheel, we want to make sure that the surface is in good condition. Your flywheel possibly will look a bit better than this, however you will need to clean it to check it to make sure it's not scored or even cracked. I doubt you'll find cracking on a Land Rover flywheel unless it's been excessively abused. If it has heat glazing, then that will need to be scrubbed and keyed up, very much like this flywheel has already. It will be necessary to get some brake and clutch cleaner and an applicator, and this will take the dust off the flywheel first of all. And this is very good stuff. It's just a matter of wiping it and it will dry itself completely. It is also highly flammable and volatile, so no smoking around this. You'll also need to clean the wax off the pressure plate from new. This will make sure that the friction plate is not contaminated, so it won't judder and slip when you first use the clutch. Okay, for fitting the driven plate I have a gearbox input shaft which has perfect splines which fits into this splined hub here on the friction plate, and it also fits very nicely into the toe bearing here. You can see the splines on the gearbox. Okay, right, so the second type of tool here is the proper tool which Land Rover recommend, which is just the same sort of size, which fits into the splined hub and also fits into the toe bearing. Okay, easy enough if you have those. This aligns the splined hub and the toe bearing, so when you put your gearbox in it will fit straight away. Third option is the cheapest option, is using a socket with some black tape on it to take up the slack, and one that's suitable to fit into the toe bearing, and that will also align up the driven plate. However, this isn't very accurate. What we're looking for is perfect clutch alignment, so you can slip your gearbox in and you can see this is aligned perfectly. Alignment is so important first off, and whether you have something that's been cut off an old gearbox, once you've got the pressure plate on, you will not be able to adjust the alignment, so it needs to be right first off. Clutch misalignment will cause you a lot of problems when you're trying to get the gearbox on, so it's best to get it right before you either get the gearbox positioned or the engine positioned. Okay, so once your flywheel is clean and smooth and you know it's okay, the driven plate can go on and into place. Alright, that's how it's supposed to fit. Now, you can't get it the wrong way round because there's a raised edge one side. If you try to fit it the wrong way, then the friction material will not touch the flywheel, and this is what you're looking for. Once it's like this, it's okay. On your flywheel, you'll have some studs which line up the pressure plate assembly, so you can line up your bolt holes and screw it into place. I'd always recommend putting new spring washers on with the bolts, like so, brand new ones because they usually be flat, and I'd recommend using the same length bolts so you don't get a disbalance. Best process is to put the bolts in loosely first and then wind them up a bit, because as you pull the bolts down, the diaphragm will pull down as well. And what you're trying to achieve is to gradually pull it down evenly on all of the bolts. This way you won't get any problems. You need to torque up each one of the bolts correctly, and I'll leave you to go to your workshop manual to find out what the torque is. These are M8 bolts. You can see here the diaphragm fingers themselves are now flat and they're now ready and operational. So rechecking this to make sure that the alignment is correct will save you a lot of frustration later when you go to offer the gearbox up. So we've got the clutch assembly in place. The next thing to do is look at the release mechanism and the parts involved and how to fit them.